We need to have a talk. Hi everybody, welcome to the Broken Meeple and this special sponsored video from ZATU Games. Yes, as you know, as much as this channel is sponsored by Kinder, ZATU and I also like to do the odd little giveaway together. Last month you would have checked out, hopefully, my Quacks of Quedlinburg Megabucks review, and there was a lucky winner who got to win a copy of that, and this video is no different, except this one's a little bit different from other stuff I've done, because, as you can see, I've got in front of me a ton of Catan boxes, and I am one of those people that has still sung the praises of this game. Is it the best game ever? No. Oh, okay, there are better games that I enjoy more, but I still give a lot of respect to Catan, and I still enjoy playing it. But there's a lot of talk these days where everyone's like ready to rag on Catan. I even watched the top 10 Dice Tower video recently where they said games they'd cooled on, and the People's Choice had Catan at number 1. And I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed with this, because yes, okay, Catan is an older game, it's 1995 it came out, and you know, maybe it's not as popular as it was then, but that doesn't necessarily make the game rubbish now, okay? I don't subscribe to the whole cult of the new thing, or as I like to call it, cult of the unreleased when it comes to Kickstarter, but then I'm also not necessarily cult of the old either. I'm kind of in the middle. There are new games that come out that I can go mad for, but then I still have some respect for the older titles. And the idea of this video is to explain to you my reasons why I believe Catan is not dead, okay? Catan is still going strong and still worth your time, but then I also want to give a little bit of a general guide on the expansions themselves. So I've got essentially all the expansions for the normal series. I'm not talking about spin-offs like Game of Thrones or the Inkers or the new Dawn of Humankind that's coming out. No, I'm talking specifically the base version of Catan as well as these editions from the 5th edition refresh. I'm going to give you a kind of general overview of what I think of each one. But that's not all. You get a chance to win any one of the 5 boxes you see here. This is only open to the UK, I'm afraid, due to the worldwide shipping crisis, but ZATU will post any one of these 5 here to a lucky winner of a giveaway contest that we'll talk about at the end of this video. So whether you're new to Catan and need the base set, or you've been like setting your mind on one of these expansions in order to sort of bulk up your particular version, then here's your chance.
When will then be now? Soon.
So if you're brand new to Catan, what even is it? Well, Catan is a very simple game where you, essentially, to put it in a few words, you collect resources, you trade with other players, and you build buildings. That's pretty much the deal of the game. What happens is that you have a map with different hex tiles of different terrain and numbers on them. You build settlements on roads on those hexes, and at the start of your turn you roll 2 dice, and if the dice match the number on the tile, then those people next door to it collect resources. You are then free to trade with other players around the table. So you've got wood and stone and brick and wool in this game, and I think ore as well, and you basically get to decide, right, I could use an extra wood. Can you give me sheep for wood? Can you give me sheep for wood? You know, that'd be great. That's the most common one you get to hear. But this one allows you to freely trade as you like, make whatever deals you like as long as it's there and then. And then afterwards, you simply build more buildings. You can build more roads in order to connect yourself to more areas on the map. You build settlements, which you need in order to collect the resources off the various tiles. You can upgrade settlements to cities in order to collect more so, and obviously gain more victory points. Or you can buy these development cards, which give you some cards with special abilities, give you knight cards, which allow you to mess around with this robber character who's potentially able to steal from other players. It's just a very simple game, and that's pretty much the deal. Everybody carries on until you get to 10 victory points, although with the variants you have to kind of tweak that a little bit. But that's kind of what the typical thing of Catan is. It's just a simple roll the dice, collect the resources, have some fun trading, a bit of social interaction, build buildings. Nice, fairly simple rules. I mean, honestly, the rules to this game are very simple. This is a gateway level game. If you want to introduce somebody to a kind of more typical Eurofair style game, this is still a good one to go for. And I am talking base set only here. Okay, as soon as you start throwing this in, you start venturing out of that gateway territory. But base set Catan is still a worthy inclusion. So why do I feel it still holds up? Multiple reasons, so let's go through each one in turn. First off, I mentioned the simplicity of the rules. It is still simple. Your turn is basically roll dice, collect, trade, and then build buildings, all of which are on a tiny little tile in front of you that tells you what you need in order to build them. That's the crux of the game, really. There's a few little rules about, alright, this is the rules for trading, or this is what certain development cards do, or this is what happens when you roll a 7 and move the robber around, but they're very straightforward. You know, it will not take you long to get into this game, and by the time you're done with one game of it, you'll be able to play it like that. No problem. All you got to do is just clear off the buildings. You could even mess around with the numbers on the map, rearrange the tiles a little bit. There's prescribed maps in here, but then you can also simply just design your own and see what craziness you can set up. So there's a good amount of variety in there. But it's just a nice, simple, pleasant game. Yes, there's a little bit of viciousness with blocking other players and that, but it's not like horrifically vindictive, and in any case, the game, another pro for this, is not very long either. It plays from 3 to 4 players. You can get expansions up it to 5 to 6 players. Honestly, don't do that. I really do not recommend playing this with 5 or 6 players.
5 is right out.
Another key reason, the trading aspect. There's not a lot of games, even in the modern age, that allow you to trade with other players. And when they do allow you to trade with other players, they tend to be more complex affairs. Colosseum, a game that's probably going to leave my collection soon, has you trading with other players, but you've got all these other rules on top, and the game is significantly more complicated and longer than this is. And then you can go to the extreme where you get stuff like the Cosmic Encounter, where negotiate, well, you don't even trade in that, that's technically negotiation. A better example would be Sidereal Confluence. Yes, have you heard of that one?
Who?
I suspect a lot of you probably haven't. It's this really heavy but fun trading and negotiation game where you, well, all the resources have names, but frankly you might as well just call it blue cube, yellow cube, and green cube for all that matters. But you've got different space races and you trade cubes with that, but blimey, there's a lot of complexity to that game. It's fun. I think it's really cool. My friend has it. I don't think I need to buy my own copy though, but you're going into the heavy games territory at this point. There are very few games that let you trade with other players in such a light game setting. And you'll hear the term multiplayer solitaire mentioned a lot. That is a term that usually means that you're playing the game with other players, but it doesn't really matter what the other players do, you're kind of doing your own thing. No, this game is very interactive. You're all on the same map. You're all in each other's faces, like trying to vie for space. Obviously, you know, if somebody's like thinking of going in the direction that you are on the road, you might want to try and build ahead of them. You've got the longest road as an objective tile. Like, who's got the longest road on the map? Well, you're going to be fighting other players for that. But the trading aspect is the most interactive part. Once you've done collecting the resources, you probably won't have what you need. You're gonna need to start making deals with other players. It gets you talking, it gets you engaging in banter. It just brings out more social activity, and honestly, there are very few games I can think of that are this light, that give you that sense of trading. And no, I'm not including Monopoly in this.
That belongs in a museum.
Thirdly, and we'll get onto this in more detail with these expansions here, the level of customization you have with Catan. The base set alone allows you to pretty much do what you like with the main map, but once you start throwing in any of these, you don't need all of them. I mean, I've got like all of them here, but seriously, you could just pick any one of these, and it will give you a lot of different ways to augment the game and play it to your own style. You do not need every single bit of Catan. I stipulate that right now. This is why the giveaway is only going to give you 1 box and not all 5. But you can go to this extreme like I have, but seriously, you could just pick any one of these and it would totally change up the way that you play Catan. Lots of people have got their, different opinions on which one they think is their favorite, and certainly I'm no different on that regard. We'll get into that later. But yeah, if you've played Catan to death and you think, oh, I need to change it up a little bit, the world's your oyster when it comes to deciding on which one you want. The replay value of this game, or the expandability of this game to be more accurate, is off the charts.
I don't know what it is, but I want to try it.
And the final plus point I'll mention is, well, it's a negative for some people, but I think it's a bit of both. Some people do not like the randomness factor in this game, and there is a fair bit of randomness. I mean, you're drawing cards off a deck blind, and you are rolling dice, in order to gain resources. But other games are random as well. In fact, there's another game that's really popular called Space Base, which effectively uses the same system. You don't hear people complaining about that one, do you? But with this one, yeah, you're rolling dice, and if the numbers don't come up, then, you know, it could hose you in terms of resources. But the game's a 60-minute affair. A short game is not that bad when it comes to randomness, and in any case, there are still interesting decisions for you to make in terms of trading with other players and what you're actually going to do with the resources you have. I mean, do you upgrade to the city? Do you venture out to the harbour? Do you go for the longest road or the Knight's Tile? You know, simple decisions. This is not like going to burn your brain or anything, but it's not like it's on autopilot. And even then, that randomness factor means that people who are not used to games have a chance of winning this. I've got a group of friends who constantly play games with me thinking that the scoring system is basically Luke at first place and they venture for second place. Which, granted, with the games that I'm teaching, I've had more experience with them, that does tend to be the case. Now, this is one of those games, though, where I can happily lose. And it happens. In fact, I played a game of this with them last week, and I pretty much, I think, I can't remember if I was second or third, I think third, actually. I was really off to a bad start, and a friend of mine won convincingly. You know, anybody can win this game. They don't have to feel like, oh, you know, you always win games. What's the point of me even trying? No, you're in with a shot with this one, and the catch-up mechanism in this works because with the trading aspect, you're unlikely to trade with a person who's in the lead. So if you are falling behind, expect to be getting a few resources down your way because people are more willing to trade with you than they are the person in the lead.
Shrek! Oh, come on, donkey. Look at him in his wee little boots.
Right, well that's enough raving about Catan itself, so why don't we deposit Catan over here, out of sight, and get on with these expansions. So first up, let's tackle probably, well, yeah, spoiler alert, my favourite of the lot already. Seafarers. This is the easiest include that you want to do, and it's the first one that came out after normal Catan. Put simply, it basically just enables you to have multiple islands. That's kind of the main gist. Normally Catan is just one big island, but this time you get to have lots of little islands, or maybe just two fairly big islands. And it comes with basically the rules to do it, which is all you have is basically ships. So as well as making buildings and roads and all that, you can now make sails. Which, given that some people will claim that in normal Catan wool is not the most useful of resources, well now it is, because it makes the sails for your ship. So if you want to go to explore another island, you're going to need sheep. And you're going to need to turn them into lovely, sweet little sails. But with this one, it comes with a scenario book with 9 scenarios in it to allow you to change up the game and learn the rules. Now, as with all these scenario books, it's not like every scenario is great. What you essentially do with Seafarers is you use this preferably with 4 specific scenarios. The first 3 are nice and simple. It teaches you how to do multiple small islands, couple of big islands, and what I call the fog islands, which basically means that you sail to a point, the tiles are flipped down, and you don't know what's there until you go there and flip them up. So there's an element of exploration in there, which is cool. But what I really like in this is the 9th scenario in here. The 9th scenario is called New World, and basically it is the DIY of Seafarers Catan. You lay out the frames as normal, and you put in the hexes and numbers at complete random. So you create a completely different archipelago landscape just randomly off the bat. You can create all sorts of weird scenarios with this, with like loads of little islands, or maybe one giant like seascape in between 2 islands that are at opposite ends of the map. It really is the way I like to play Seafarers, that big 9th scenario. The other scenarios are kind of hit and miss. You've got one where you go get cloth, you've got one where you get points for going to little islands, you've got one where you set up wonders. Scenarios 4 through to 8 are okay, but I find myself rarely wanting to play them. They're a little bit complicated in places, and maybe just not as fun, I would say, as simply just building your own archipelago, really. Seafarers is still my favourite expansion, though, because yes, okay, you're not going to necessarily use all 9 scenarios, but the fact that you get to add little islands and DIY landscapes to your game of Catan makes this a favourite because it's so easy to include. Other than those scenarios I mentioned, all you've got to basically teach people is how to build ships and what happens when you reach an island. That's pretty much the only extra rules in the game. There's nothing else. So it's a nice easy include, but it creates like a lot of decent scenarios. So definitely Seafarers is one to check out for my personal recommendation.
I admire its purity.
I said Seafarers was a little bit more like really easy to include. Why don't we take the bonkers opposite of that, which is cities and knights. Cities and knights is regarded as a favourite by a lot of people. I think Seafarers is my favourite, and that's shared with some people, but there are others who prefer cities and knights, and I can see why. If you wanted Catan to be a bit more, what's the word, gamery, you wanted it to be a bit more complex, you wanted more stuff to do, then Cities and Knights is the way to go. It doesn't introduce more scenarios, but what it does, it basically doubles the rules in the game. So, as well as resources, you now have commodities that you can get. You've got flip charts that give you 3 different, like, sort of progression paths to go for science, for trade, for war, and you can level up the buildings in those. That could give you a special ability, but it can also give you points. It also allows you to gain progress cards, which enable you to perform like weird. If you imagine the development cards for Catan, the progress cards are basically that to the next level. But on top of that, you've also got knights. You can level up 3 levels of knights, and you can send them off to go like get in the way of other people's knights. But then also you have to defend yourself from barbarian attacks. Over the course of the game, a track will move this barbarian counter, and when it reaches the end, they attack, and depending on who defends Catan the best, could get more victory points, but then if you don't defend Catan, you could end up getting your landscapes pillaged, you know. So there is an incentive to fight, but there's also an incentive to be the best at fighting. This is a very involved expansion to Cities and Knights. Not one I recommend for first players in any circumstances. I would not teach Catan Cities and Knights to anybody. I would happily teach Seafarers to do players. But this one is more, you've played Catan a bit and you want something to make it a bit more involved and a bit more thinky. This is definitely the way to do it, although bearing in mind it will probably add to the length for this game as well. You can do normal Catan and Seafarers in about 45 to 60 minutes. Here you're more talking 75 to 90 minutes to finish a game of Cities and Knights. But having all those extra choices, the commodity resources, the barbarians, the knights, the extra progression paths, those progress cards in general, it does make this a very fun version of Catan, and you can play this, I don't think you can, if you can combine this with Seafarers, I'm not entirely sure, but honestly, I don't recommend combining all of these expansions in general. I feel like you should pick one and go with it. Apart from, well, we'll get onto this one in a minute. But Cities and Knights is great if you want basically gamers Catan. Alrighty, we'll put that aside. Now we get on to the variant version, as I like to call, which is Traders and Barbarians. This is basically multiple variants of Catan. And that's essentially it. It's a collection of little mini scenarios or mini augments that you can make to the game, which have been based on like customer feedback, but also just ideas that Catan Studio has. This one is definitely mainly worth picking up, I would say, after you've tried those other 2. Although, saying that, there are a couple of augments in here that I love to bits. Essentially, the easy augments that you have are 3 things. 1, Harbour Master tile. Normally you've got longest road and you've got biggest army for 2 extra points. People used to not like building on the edges of the map at the harbours though. Here now you get a Harbour Master tile, which is 2 points if you've got so much victory points worth of cities and stuff on the edge of the map or on the harbour spaces. So now you have an incentive to build on the coastline, and it's just easy to throw in. All you got to do is add the victory point limit to win the game by 1, and that's it. You just throw in the tile. It's the easiest augment to do. Hell, you could probably just write it on a piece of paper and shove it into your normal game of Catan without even getting the expansion. It's so easy to include. But you want a nice tile with artwork, surely. Next one you have is the Rivers of Catan. The Rivers of Catan is a way that you replace some of the hexes with these hexes with a river going across it. You can build bridges over it, which you have to in order to get across it in some areas. But what happens is that it enables you to get gold, and this gold can be used to trade for various resources, but there's also a potential positive and negative point scoring opportunity for being the wealthiest or the poorest settler. So even if you're not desperate to get a ton of cash, there is still an incentive for you to go at some point near the river. Again, it's a pretty easy include, one that I usually play with every now and again. But again, I don't recommend mixing it with too many scenarios. I prefer to sort of go, oh, you don't fancy Seafarers, but you want something nice and easy? Okay, fine, let's just throw in the Rivers to normal Catan. But preferably, the one I'd rather use, if you're going to go down that path, is Fisherman of Catan. Fisherman of Catan is an augment in this where you put a lake tile instead of the desert, which can get you fish, and around the outside of the map you have fish that you can collect from the coastline. So it's another incentive to go on the edge of the map, along with Harbour Master tile. It's a great inclusion. But with these fish, when you roll the dice and collect resources, in certain areas you will have the opportunity to collect fish tokens. And these fish tokens can be traded in for cards and resources and various other things. That's it. It's very simple, but it gives another resource to collect in the game, and it gives an incentive to build on the coastline again. Honestly, this is one of those ones that I actually am happy to mix in with other scenarios. Mix it with a bit of Seafarers, or mix it with the Harbour Master and the Rivers of Catan. In fact, honestly, Base Catan, Rivers of Catan, and the Fisherman of Catan is a pretty good scenario mix to go for, and it doesn't complicate the game too much, but adds a good amount of variety to the game in general. Now, I said 3 small scenario augments. There's actually a 4th one that's just come to my mind, and that is the event cards. Now, one thing I mentioned before is that people are usually a bit like, oh, they attack Catan because of the randomness. I don't like randomness at all in my game. How about we use this instead? And this is the event card system. You replace the dice with a deck of cards. They are numbered from 1 to 12 to represent the values on the dice, and some of them have events that trigger. What you do is that you shuffle the deck, position a New Year card, sort of about 5 or 6 cards in the end, so you don't use every card every time it cycles through, so there is a little bit of a variance. But what happens is you simply flip the top card of the deck, and that's the number that gets rolled. It's even compatible with Cities and Knights, because Cities and Knights also includes an event die. I didn't mention that, triggers various things. But if you don't like the dice, then use the cards, because they're built in such a way that it's based on the probability of the numbers. So yes, there are more cards with a 7 on them, and obviously more with a 6 and 8 on them than there are a 9 and a 10. But they're in there. So other than those few cards at the end, they're gonna come up. You will not have a situation where, you position yourself on an 11 hex and 11 never gets rolled the entire game. There's cards in there for 11. They will come up. It's just a case of when they come up. And some friends of mine actually do like us using that deck of cards rather than the dice when we play Catan. And honestly, I'm either or. I'll happily roll the dice, but, I'm happy to use the cards as well. It just caters for both parties. Do you want the dice or do you want the cards? Pick your poison. It works with pretty much any augment of Catan you do, frankly. Now, the more complex part of this, which is probably my least liked aspect of this expansion, are the 3 scenarios that you get. You've got the traders, you've got barbarians, and you've kind of got a combination of the 2. The traders one is pretty meh. It's pretty meh, really. You essentially have these caravan, camels or whatever, that you lead in from the desert, an oasis hex, and based on where these go across the road, you can get little bonuses and stuff. It's fine, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's a pretty mild scenario, and honestly, I would skip it. The Barbarians is one where occasionally barbarians will come on the coast and they'll start messing around with your hexes. So again, this is one where you build up knights from a castle hex and try and fend them off. But it's difficult to fend them off by yourself, so you do have to cooperate with other players to an extent. This is a cool scenario, it's relatively straightforward, and it just adds that little bit of extra interaction with other players. My preferred one of the 3, though, is the Traders and Barbarians combo, though. This will, like Cities and Knights, make it a good sort of 90-minute game, at least probably. It does elongate things a bit, but it essentially introduces a pick up and deliver variant. So 3 hexes on the board have got specific places you can visit for a commodity of some description. The commodity will dictate one of the other 2 places it needs to go to, and you have a wagon piece that you move in addition to your turn. You can upgrade the wagon to make it faster or be able to fend off the odd barbarian that's sitting on some of the roads. And essentially you have so many movement points to move your wagon throughout the map. You pay gold to other players if you use their roads, but if you use your own roads, it's faster and obviously free. But it's a very simple pick up and deliver system where you just get more victory points for delivering to those various places. But this one can get pretty vicious. I mean, you are building in the way of other players. So you're deliberately putting roads down just so that they pay you money for their wagon to go over your roads. Or they've got to take the long way round. And you're also putting barbarians on the road in order to make life more expensive for them. Yeah, this one gets pretty evil, so not a scenario I recommend if you want to play nice Catan, but if you're into a little bit of extra blocking or a little bit of like, you know, how dare you, then the Traders and Barbarians scenario in this does well. So this is essentially like a pick and mix of things that you can do with Catan. I personally like it more for those 4 little mini augments that you can do. The Harbour Master goes in every single game I do, the Fisherman goes in most of the games I do, and the Rivers vary, and the event cards are a cool addition as well. Those 3 extra scenarios, it's just icing on the cake really. So this is a pick and mix bag of Catan bits, although I just recommend that unless you're really desperate for some of those mini augments I mentioned, you could probably get Seafarers or City of Knights before you think about getting this one. Now this last one is a bit of a weird one. It's a little unusual. These other Catan boxes that I've mentioned can be combined with base set Catan and they augment it in whatever way you choose. This is almost kind of a spin-off in its own regard. You don't combine this at all with the augments that I've shown you before. This is kind of its own separate thing. It's a collection of 5 scenarios in which as you go through each scenario, it's effectively inserting a couple of extra rules before you eventually get to scenario 5, which is like a culmination of everything. But this is a weird one. It's its own little separate thing. Like, you really only... If you're going to not buy Seafarers or Cities or Traders and Barbarians, you get base set Catan and you get this. You need base set Catan in order to do this, but you don't combine this with Cities and Knights. You don't combine this with Seafarers. It's kind of got a little bit of those already woven into it. Essentially what this one does is that it puts you on a small island, but then from there you can build on that island to your heart's content, but then there's these 2 areas on the map which are essentially hidden, so you've got to go discover them, a bit of exploration, and essentially what you do is that you do what Seafarers kind of did. You build boats, although you don't build like a big trail of boats, you instead have an actual boat that you sail across the map, a bit like the wagon from the previous one. And you go explore these islands, you can find spices that you've got to deliver back, you might find pirates that get in your way, you've got to actually take settlers, I mean it is called the Settlers of Catan, well it's called Catan now, but it was called the Settlers of Catan originally. You can actually have a scenario where you take a settler piece, put it on your boat, take it over to those islands, and then the settler comes off the boat and becomes a settlement in its own regard. So you're actually settling people on new lands. It's a really odd expansion. I like it, but the fact that it's kind of almost standalone, you need the base game components in order to work with it. It doesn't have them in the box, but you can literally play this with no consideration for Seafarers, Cities, or Traders and Barbarians, and just play it at its own thing. But it's really cool. I mean, you've got some of the fish aspect from Traders in here. You've got the Seafarers aspect here of going along with the boats. You've got the Pirates aspect from Traders and Barbarians sort of woven in here a bit. You've got the pick up and deliver part that I mentioned before kind of in here. Not all, well, if you go to the 5th scenario you'll get pretty much all of that thrown in, but the 1st scenario is literally just explore the islands and settle down on them. You know, nice and straightforward. Then it starts expanding it by going, right, well now pirates kind of show up. You can go kill them and, oh yeah, we need you to not only settle, but we need you to go get some spice and bring it back. It's a really cool scenario box, but it is definitely probably a more advanced version of Catan. It's kind of on par with Cities and Knights, I think, in terms of its complexity. But you kind of have to decide for yourself whether this one is for you, because getting this one when you have all the other augments might feel a little bit redundant. Like, you know, you're not going to use any of those extra boxes that you've got if you're using this. So I almost kind of recommend that you get this with just base set Catan as a potential alternative path. Get Seafarers and Cities and Traders and Barbarians as the other path, but maybe the other path you might want to consider is just this one with base set Catan. You haven't got to spend as much money, and like I say, you get plenty of content in this box. I mean, it's 5 big scenarios with all the pieces and stuff. It's a pretty cool expansion, just a bit of an odd one.
Monkey!
So yeah, that is Catan in all its multi-box glory. Kind of ridiculous. I've got all 5 boxes, but I still think Catan is a cool game. Is it my favourite game ever? No. Okay, it's usually in the lower end of my top 100. But it's still in my top 100 games. I still enjoy bringing it out as a nice, charming resource management trading game. Not many games can promote as much social interaction as Catan can for gateway level gamers. You've got to admit that. Even if it's not necessarily your favourite game, you've got to admit it does do some things that you won't see replicated in other like games. So what about that giveaway aspect? Well, first off, ZATU Games are the ones doing this, so I urge you honestly to go onto their Instagram channel and subscribe to them. I think they've also got a YouTube channel as well, so go check out ZATU Games on YouTube and Instagram, subscribe to them and show your support and thank them for doing this giveaway. But in order to enter this contest, what you need to do, very simply, is you've got two chances to enter it. You've either got subscribe and comment on this video, or you've got follow and comment on an Instagram post that I will post straight after doing this video. All you have to do is simply follow and comment, but what you need to comment is which one of the 5 you want and why. Why do you want Seafarers? Why are you interested in getting Catan now, like when you've not played it before? Why are you sort of thinking, well, you know what, I would like to try Explorers and Pirates, or maybe I'm really interested in that Fisherman variant that you mentioned. You know, I want to know your reasons for the one that you do. I will then, by complete random number generation, pick a winner, and that winner will get whichever box they picked in their comment posted out to them. So, yeah. Hopefully you'll be able to, you know, win a copy of that, but either way, I'd just be interested to know your thoughts. So good luck to you. Anyway, that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please consider liking the video, thumbing it up, subscribing to the channel, consider checking out the Patreon to help the channel out a bit further with review copies, but by all means, just simply comment on the video and let me know what you think of Catan, if it's good or bad. There's a lot of people who hate Catan with a passion. Fair play, we all like different things, but it's got its fans. I mean, they're doing a championship at the moment, you know, so it's still going strong, and I will defend it to this day and still say it's a game worthy of your attention. So until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including my reviews that I've done of First Contact and Alice's Garden, 2 other light games that are definitely worth your consideration. So until next time, I'll see you soon, and take care, and remember as always, it's only a game. Bye for now, everyone.